The story begins with a chilling statistic. Every year, approximately 42,000 people die on American highways. The focus then shifts to a young college student named Jim, who is waiting by his car for his girlfriend, Grace. The couple is planning a road trip to New Mexico. Soon, Grace arrives, and they set off on their long journey. As they drive through the night, a violent rainstorm hits the highway. While they are talking to stay awake, a man suddenly appears right in front of their car. Jim swerves violently, struggling to maintain control, and narrowly avoids a catastrophic accident. Furious and shaken, Jim stops the car, wanting to confront the man and vent his anger. However, Grace stops him, arguing that it is pitch black, storming, and entirely unsafe to get out on the highway at night. She begs him to just drive away. As they look back, they see the stranger walking toward a broken-down truck parked by the road, and then he starts heading toward Grace's side of the car. Panic sets in as Jim tries to start the engine. After a few tense, failed attempts, the car roars to life, and they speed away, leaving the man behind. Shaken by the encounter, the couple drives until they reach a gas station. They are exhausted, running low on fuel, and need food. While inside the convenience store, Jim mentions the stranded man to the shopkeeper, suggesting that someone should check on him, since his truck broke down in the middle of a heavy storm. Suddenly, a man walks into the store, completely drenched from the rain. The shopkeeper asks Jim if this is the man he was talking about. Realizing it is the same hitchhiker, Jim approaches him to apologize, explaining that they panicked because it was dark and raining heavily. The man accepts the apology and introduces himself as John Ryder. Grace soon returns from the restroom. John explains to the couple that his truck is dead, and asks if they can give him a ride to a nearby motel. Wanting to make up for leaving him on the road earlier, Jim agrees without thinking it through, and all three get into the car. A short distance into the drive, John begins making highly inappropriate and uncomfortable comments about Grace's appearance. Jim grows angry, but before he can react, John violently grabs Jim's phone and breaks it. He then pulls out a knife, threatening Jim and forcing him to keep driving. From the back seat, Grace tries to use her phone to call the police, but John notices and grabs her, holding the knife directly to her throat. Terrified and desperate, Jim slams on the brakes with all his might. The sudden deceleration sends John flying into the windshield, injuring him. Seizing the moment, Jim kicks John out of the car onto the pavement and hits the gas, escaping into the night. The next morning, Jim and Grace are still driving, deeply traumatized, but trying to move past the horrifying night. They spot a family in another car ahead of them, clearly on a road trip. The sight brings them comfort, until they look closer and realize that John Ryder is sitting inside the car with them, having successfully hitched another ride. Jim wants to stay out of it to keep them safe, but Grace insists they have to warn the family before John hurts them. Jim pulls up alongside the family's car, and Grace rolls down her window, screaming at them that the man in their car is a dangerous killer. During the chaos, a massive truck suddenly appears in their lane from the opposite direction. Jim swerves to avoid a head-on collision, losing control of the vehicle. Their car crashes off the highway. Fortunately, Jim and Grace survive without major injuries, but their car is completely destroyed. Left with no other options, they begin walking down the highway on foot, trying to flag down passing cars. But nobody stops. Crime scene and arrest. As they continue walking, they stumble upon the family's car parked on the side of the road. Approaching it carefully, they discover a horrific scene. John has brutally murdered the family. Only the father is barely alive, suffering from severe, life-threatening wounds. Jim and Grace lift the dying man into the family's car, and drive at full speed toward the nearest town to find a hospital. As the man's condition rapidly worsens, Jim pulls over at a roadside diner, and tells Grace to run inside to call the police. Grace runs into the restroom to hide and call for help. Within minutes, the police arrive, but instead of helping, they draw their weapons, place Jim and Grace under arrest at gunpoint, and transport them to the local police station. At the station, the police interrogate them. Grace desperately tries to explain that they are innocent, and that the real killer is a psychopath named John Ryder. The officers refuse to believe their story, and lock Jim in a separate holding cell. A short while later, John Ryder infiltrates the police station. He walks into the cell block, finds Jim, and begins to torture and attempt to kill him. Grace manages to break free from her interrogation room, only to walk into a bloodbath. John has brutally slaughtered every police officer in the building. Grace finds a fallen officer's shotgun, points it at John, and uses the distraction to free Jim. Together, they flee the station. Outside, a surviving police officer spots them. Believing Jim and Grace are the killers, the officer draws his weapon to arrest them. Jim tries to step forward to explain the situation, but the officer forces him down. Desperate to protect Jim, Grace holds the officer at gunpoint, ordering him to back off. Suddenly, a sniper shot rings out, killing the officer instantly. The shot didn't come from Grace. John fired it from the shadows to frame the couple. Other arriving police units see the officer drop, and assume Grace fired the shot. Jim and Grace jump into the dead officer's police cruiser and flee. A massive police pursuit ensues, involving multiple squad cars and a police helicopter tracking them from above. Suddenly, John Ryder joins the chase in a stolen truck, driven by pure psychopathic malice. John uses his vehicle to systematically ram the police cars, destroying the squad cars and shooting down the police helicopter. Terrified by the escalating carnage, Jim and Grace abandon their car on the highway and flee on foot into a nearby desert motel to hide. Thinking he can protect Grace by leaving her behind, Jim slips out of the motel room alone while she is resting. Left alone, Grace tries to calm down by watching TV, but John bursts into the room and attacks her. She narrowly escapes and runs outside into the motel courtyard, where she discovers a horrifying trap. The police finally tackle and arrest John Ryder, taking Grace into protective custody as well. At the staging area, a senior officer informs Grace that the man's name isn't actually John Ryder. In fact, the authorities have absolutely no records of who he truly is, describing him as a completely phantom serial killer. During his interrogation, John acts completely insane, leaving the officers with no choice but to transport him to a maximum security psychiatric facility. He is loaded into a secure prisoner transport bus, while Grace is placed in a separate police escort car right behind it. En route, John uses a brutal tactic. He intentionally breaks his own thumb to slip out of his handcuffs. He kills the guards inside the bus, causing the driver to lose control. The massive transport bus crashes violently, slamming directly into the police car carrying Grace. The bus catches fire, and fuel begins leaking everywhere. John breaks out of the wreckage just before the bus explodes in a massive fireball. He walks over to Grace's crashed police car and shoots the surviving officer dead. John thinks he has won, but Grace crawls out of the burning wreckage, battered but alive. Driven by pure survival and the desire to avenge Jim, she grabs the officer's fallen shotgun, confronts John Ryder one last